9th of January 2023. This is one of those what the fuck moments, and it is about the Ukraine. And I just want to make it clear, I'm not a political analyst or economical analyst or a military analyst. I'm just a guy that reads a lot, and I think about the things that I read, and I have a tendency to pick the things up that people in general would normally just page over. So this is what my channel do. I bring you those things that you are most probably not going to see on your television or in the newspapers. This morning I was in a debate. I don't even want to call it a debate, it was more a skirmish on Twitter with a guy that made the most hilarious claims. He had claims about the massive amounts of Russian military equipment, tanks and armored vehicles and artillery pieces that the Ukraine has apparently taken from the Russians. And I'm talking big numbers, thousands. He claims the Russians lost 9,000 tanks. For fuck's sakes. My question to him was simply this. Okay, so if the Russians has lost that high number of military equipment pieces, and according to you and your sources, the Ukraine has got them now, that means that the Ukraine has got more military hardware now than before the war. So just explain to me, why is the Ukraine consistently demanding more weapons from the West? And he could not answer that one. But I left that debate because I have learned over the past few months, there are certain people that you just simply do not engage. You don't engage them because they refuse flatly to accept anything you say. They are solidly brainwashed, and I have said it in previous Skidmarks. I wonder if that jab does not contain something that programs the people to follow the MSM. I wouldn't be surprised. Let's start with this. Russia is destroying Ukraine's economy, raising costs for the US and allies. Due to damage to Ukraine's energy systems, the West is preparing for the worst-case scenarios, the Washington Post wrote. That's an interesting statement that he's making there, but I do think that there is some validity in it, because the financial drag that the Ukraine is putting on the West. 2 months of relentless missile and drone attacks by Russia have decimated Ukraine's critical infrastructure and blown a hole in previous economic forecasts. Before those strikes, Kiev expected to need at least $55 billion in foreign assistance next year to meet basic expenses, more than the country's entire annual pre-war spending. And obviously he's referring now to 2023. The fact is that I don't know why the West is pumping so much money into the Ukraine. I cannot understand. The Ukraine government could be left without international reserves to pay for critical imports and unable to meet its external debt obligations. A doomsday scenario known as a balance of payments crisis, the article said. In addition, according to the journalists, massive outflows of Ukrainians abroad will lead to the withdrawal of significant funds, which may result in the collapse of the national currency. And I have read other articles where the guys are concerned about what is going to happen to the Ukrainian currency. 2023, the Ukrainian economy may drop another 5% on top of the current 33% decline. The country will need a cash injection from the West to avert disaster. Some officials believe Ukraine may need another $2 billion a month, and political leaders have begun trying to prepare Western backers for such worst-case scenarios. Where is this money coming from? I saw a program by Garland Nixon earlier today in which he was talking specifically about the state of homelessness and economical dissolution of the people in America. Now my question is this: how can a government with a clean conscience send billions to the Ukraine while its own citizens is struggling like hell? And this is for America and for Britain specifically, and to a large extent for Europe itself. Then I came onto this interesting piece that the guy wrote, and I read it a few times, and I must say, it makes a lot of sense. Everything is written correctly, especially about what Ukraine could have become if it had chosen a different vector of state building in 1990. For example, federal and multilingual country in which Ukrainians, Russians, Hungarians, and in general all the nations inhabiting Ukraine would have a great life. It would be logical and reasonable, and many of the problems that emerge later would have been nipped in the bud. Now this is really important information. And you must add to this that in 1991, Russia took over all Ukraine's national debt, all of it. So the Ukraine started with a clean slate. The only problem is that a normal, prosperous Ukraine was not at all in the interest of the West. They read Brzezinski there and imagined that if they make anti-Russia out of Ukraine, then their centuries-old dream of eliminating the vast Russian space on the Eurasian continent would come true. They counted, of course. They won't like the result much, and that's fine. As for the words of the American human rights activists, so far, such options are marginal, but they are heard more and more often. Smart people understand that there is no country as such. There is a dead black hole in which the economy and the population are being utilized. Moreover, the rate of utilization is accelerating, and there is a large-scale project to launder the dough, which is put into a washing machine called Ukraine in billions. Leonid Eduardovich accurately noted that Ukraine has lost its sovereignty, and I will only add that she did it with joy. An independent Ukraine can only be independent together with Russia. Otherwise, she needs to lie under someone, under the Germans, Poles, or Americans. The law of life is such, and it cannot be changed. Now, there's a lot of truth in what this guy is saying here. And I think future history writers will look back at what happened in the Ukraine and shake their heads. They couldn't believe it. They won't believe it, because this was an engineered fiasco, debacle. And I am still curious, why is the West willing to bankrupt itself and to disarm itself to protect what in that? Then we get this interesting piece from this journalist. The EU suitcase without a handle. Journalist, expert in the field of information security, analyst of news agency Telecenter, Elizabeth Mosina, especially for the channel Sirocco Bello Boca. Despite the fact that Ukraine has long ago become a suitcase without a handle for the European Union, in the coming 2023, the EU approved a plan for financial assistance to Nezalezhnaya in the amount of 18 billion euros. According to Ursula von der Leyen, last year the EU spent 19.7 billion euros on the maintenance of Ukraine. Warsaw and Budapest were opposed the allocation of preferential loans to Kiev, but soon both countries withdrew their decision. Hungary approved subsidies for Ukraine in exchange for concessions on the issue of subsidies for itself. With Warsaw, the issue was resolved much easier. Washington quickly influenced the tractability of the Polish lords. All I know is that the EU is basically bankrupt. They are making a loan to give that money to Ukraine. The burden of the Europeans is not easy, and the demands of the kept women continue to grow. In fact, European officials are spending their last money to support the Nezalezhnaya, according to Ursula von der Leyen. The European Union's budget for the next 7 years is already coming to an end. And all this because of the ever-growing appetites of Kiev. So how long will the European bureaucrats carry on an unbearable burden? And that is a damn good question, and if you go and you look carefully at what's happening currently in Europe, the German economy is crashing at a hell of a rate, and they are deindustrializing. And Germany provided the backbone financially for the EU. What is going to happen with that when that backbone disappears? What is going? The answer is on the surface, as much as the big brother from across the ocean requires. And this was once again confirmed by the Chancellor of Germany. In his New Year's address to the nation, Olaf once again stressed that Germany would support Kiev and called on ordinary Germans to tighten their belts. The coming year promises to be difficult. According to the German sociologist, more than 2/3 of the German population are afraid to enter the new year due to a sharp drop in living standards, reduced incomes, and worsening energy crisis. It seems that the coming year is preparing a lot of pleasant surprises for the old world. Will Ukraine finish off the European economy in 2023? Let's wait and see. And I am quite convinced that the EU as such will most probably not survive this crisis. And NATO also. The things that is happening currently and the realities that are hitting currently spells nothing good for the West and for NATO. And I don't know why the West keeps on pumping arms in, keeps on promoting a war with Russia. This cannot end well for the West. The tragedy is Ukrainians are dying by the hundreds per hour. How is that morally acceptable? I don't know. If you know, write it in the comments for me, please. Thank you for your support. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share this thing. Have a great day.